from here is I'd watch the evolution of first-time jobless claims like a hawk. Not a long leading indicator, but a pretty powerful shorter-term leading indicator. They'll tend to spike in a very specific fashion just a few months before a downturn. That has not happened yet, but let's see how claims perform as we go through the first half of next year and ideally through next summer.
So, Mike, we did have some good jobs numbers last week, offsetting what continues to be a weakening manufacturing sector, business investment sector. How do we kind of weigh those two things? We know the consumer is 70% of the economy, but can we fully discount what's happening in the manufacturing sector?
I don't think so, because manufacturing is cyclical, so is business investment, and so sometimes if you're headed into a downturn, it's really those sectors, even though they don't represent a huge swath of the economy, that tend to falter first. So we shouldn't just write it off as irrelevant. But for the time being, as you mentioned, the strength of the consumer has really carried the day. We have 2 consecutive down quarters of business fixed investment. So essentially, you have a capital spending recession. It looks like we're sort of on the front edge of a bit of a profits recession. Markets are jubilant, but we're basically beating dramatically lowered expectations for earnings. Yet the consumer has been strong, so that's held growth up. Does that continue through the first half of next year, or does the foundation under the consumer economy, which is essentially the labor market and confidence, start to crack? That's what we need to be worried about.
Mike, what do you make of the analysis at the moment that these small shifts at a single data point generate outsized perception shifts from week to week? The global economy doesn't move that fast, but the perception of what the global economy is doing is moving radically from week to week over the last number of months. Why?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a tendency to sort of overanalyze every data point. Maybe that's, the fault of us that are participating in the financial press, where we have to try to dissect every piece of data, and maybe we make more out of it than is really there. But I also think we've had a situation where if you go back a few months, we really kind of had the sum of all fears coming together. There was recession fears at building, but you also had fears of a hard Brexit, fears of the trade war spinning out of control. We had the Hong Kong protests going full force. And so a lot of that has receded now, at least for the time being. And so, maybe it seems like it's one piece of data, but it's really these 3 or 4 things that were weighing on the market that, at least for now, seem to have receded.
We caught up with Vice Chairman Clarida on Friday. He sounded really quite optimistic about the U.S. economy. That was my big takeaway from the interview, just sitting there listening to him. Monetary policy is in a good place. The U.S. economy is in a good place. Do you think it's in a good place?
Well, I think if you look at the coincident indicators, GDP, jobs, it looks like a soft landing. And I think that's, what he was referencing. And that's what the Fed's goal was. I mean, they tightened policy not to cause a recession, but to slow growth to trend. Growth is essentially slowed to trend. And so far, so good. The real question is whether that continues as we move into the first half of next year. I think that the Fed narrative here is basically a 1995 or a 1998 scenario where rates were dropped 75 basis points and the business cycle continued. After a slowdown, very sharp slowdown in 95, 98, it was really moving through a period of sharp financial contagion in credit and currency markets. In this time, you have slowing growth, but at this point, still positive growth.
So, Mike, do you think the Fed is, in fact, we got that 25 basis point cut. Do you think they're on the sidelines now to maybe mid next year?
Well, if you look at the 12-month forward Fed funds futures market, basically has one more cut, but out there next year, and the Fed is essentially following the market. That makes some people angry.
I was going to say, is that good or bad? Fed following the market.
Yeah, I don't think they really have a choice, right? I mean, inflation expectations have come way down from where we were last year, and growth has slowed. So, if, as some other guests, not current company, have come on and said this is an outrage, the Fed should be going the other way and raising rates. I mean, that is a surefire way to to blow up the business cycle. And if that happens, then rates are going to zero or maybe even below zero. So, the Fed really doesn't have a choice because, markets are looking at the business cycle and so they will lead the Fed. So they suggest there's at least one more cut out there. But if growth deteriorates next year, there'll be more than one reduction.
Mike, let's finish up with some market calls, shall we? If you asked a global investor what had outperformed this year, the DAX or the S&P 500, I'm not sure many people would actually say the DAX, even though through 2019 it has done.
I would not have said the
by
DAX.
a couple of percentage points. The DAX is up 24% in 2019. This is the equity benchmark in Frankfurt, Germany. The S&P 500 up 22%. Have we seen the outperformance in Europe already, or is there more to go here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that we're actually struggling with. Our technical strategist J.C. O'Hara and myself are debating this now, whether this seeming outperformance in some of the European equity markets can continue. One argument would be there's already been a slowdown that's been reflected, and simply a stabilization would be enough for an outperformance to carry the day. I'm not super strongly convicted here. One thing that bothers me a bit is even with this package of monetary support that Draghi announced on his way out, very, very little movement in forward-looking inflation expectations. And so it seems like the ECB does not have the credibility or the confidence of the markets to stick to it, in these low inflation expectations are quite disturbing. So more of a question mark for me on that score.
Mike Dada, great to catch up with you. MKM Partners, Chief Economist and Macro Strategist. As we begin a new trading week, and once again we begin with some trade-happy talk, Paul.
Yes.
What struck me about our recent interview with Secretary Wilbur Ross isn't that he was talking up trade talks. It was the very idea that the licenses would be coming very shortly for US firms to sell components to Huawei. And I think the takeaway for many people is that is another sign of capitulation on the US side, a sign that these two are coming together and that maybe the chances of escalating the talks between the two sides once more have diminished again.
Exactly right. And I think that, the Huawei thing is kind of a separate issue from trade, but it's such a big, important discussion point between the two sides, Huawei being such a major player within the Chinese economy. So to the extent that we can get some happy talk, but I'm not going to, this deal is not going to be signed until it's absolutely signed. You just never know what can happen. A tweet can come out of nowhere and blow it up, and we're not even sure where the two sides are going to get together.
Can you see the parallels with the Aramco IPO? It's on, it's off, it's on. I can tell you it's on again. We'll be talking about it in just a moment here on Bloomberg Radio. We'll also be discussing McDonald's as well. Steve Easterbrook, Britain's very own, the CEO, is out of McDonald's for violating company policy. We'll be discussing that a little bit later. And Under Armour down and down hard after an investigation into its accounting practices is said to have already started, and the company this morning cutting its outlook for revenue for the year as well. So that's not helping. Putting all of that together, trade wins, optimism wins. Equity futures up 14 on the S&P 500. We're positive 0.5%. From New York this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Jonathan. 4 White House officials are scheduled to give depositions today during the House impeachment inquiry. There are questions, though, if they will show up. President Trump is competitive in head-to-head matchups with top Democrats in 6 key battleground states, according to a new set of New York Times Siena College polls. Across Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, the 6 states that Trump won most narrowly in 2016. The president trails Joe Biden by an average of 2 percentage points. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Jonathan Moore.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Equity futures are positive 14 points on the S&P 500, up 0.5%. Bit of enthusiasm out there, bit of risk appetite. Yields higher by 4 basis points to 175 on a 10-year note, up 3 basis points. Your yield on a 2-year, 1.57.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
This winter, why not take the short flight from London to Dublin with Aer Lingus from just $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. From coastal walks to cosy pubs and friendly locals, you'll find so much to enjoy once you're there. Smart takes a Dublin city break. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Terms and conditions apply.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
It's hard to enjoy your daily yoga routine when your mind is on your next VAT return and how to avoid the usual mistakes. But with QuickBooks, the new VAT Smart Scan technology does the work for you. As the deadline approaches, it checks for duplicates, looks for anomalies, and reviews VAT codes. So your biggest struggle is touching your forehead with your ankle.
Search for QuickBooks, perfect for making tax digital. QuickBooks, backing you.
Whether you're waiting for a train or a takeaway, with Tesco Mobile you don't have to wait for a brilliant deal. Our best ever Black Friday event is on. This week you can get a Samsung Galaxy A50 for just $17.49 a month. That's our lowest ever price. Get yours by the 10th of November. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Best ever Black Friday based on range of products in promotion was £18.99, now £17.49. 36-month credit agreement, rolling monthly usage agreement, subject to status, phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Rishad Salamat.
Joining us now to look at the implications of this trade war is American Apparel and Footwear Association President CEO Rick Helfenbein. Last time you were warning about the potential damage, how severe it could be. Tell us what the report is thus far now that these tariffs are in place, and presumably these American apparel and footwear makers are feeling.
Here's the deal. We'll get through holiday. On September 1, when the tariffs hit, everybody I know jumped on an airplane, flew over here and said, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to do it? How are we going to deal with holiday? We'll get through holiday. And, unemployment numbers being so shall we say, good, that, people are working, they will be spending, consumers will be buying goods. The problem that's going to start to show up that you're going to see is when you start looking at earnings in January and February. We will see severe margin compression. And even if you look at the XRT index as compared to a year ago, we're down about 10% in a market that's otherwise soaring. So as you're looking at the average of all retailers, some retailers are doing better than others. Earnings is going to be the big thing we're going to talk about. But 2020 is a real big question mark.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 7:17 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. It is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing, providing the latest thought leadership with strategic and actionable insights to help you manage and grow your business. Visit the Perspectives section of Pershing.com to learn more. Now let's check the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. McDonald's has fired Steve Easterbrook for having a consensual relationship with an employee. Company policy prohibits the CEO from having such relations. Under Armour is tumbling in early trading after revealing a federal probe. The company says officials have been investigating its accounting practices for over 2 years. Bankers on the Saudi Aramco IPO are offering a wide range of valuations. Goldman Sachs says Aramco could be worth as much as $2.3 trillion, while Bank of America has the bottom of its target at just $1.2 trillion. And on the trade front, the US is very far along with the phase one of a deal with China. That's according to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who tells Bloomberg they're still working on a location to sign an agreement. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
All right, Hannah, thank you. S&P futures up 14 points. Dow futures up 125. NASDAQ futures up 46. And the 10-year Treasury down 11/30 seconds, yield 1.75%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Don and Paul.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. Live from the Interactive Brokers Studios here in New York City. It was off, then it was on, then it's off, and now I believe it's on again.
I believe it's on again.
The Aramco IPO is going to happen, apparently. It will list in Riyadh. And joining us, I'm pleased to say, is Anthony DePaola, Bloomberg Middle East Energy Markets reporter. Anthony, walk me through what we found out this weekend, please.
Hi, good morning to you. Yes, we found out that it's on again. They put out the intention to float, which is the document that really stakes out the claim that they do plan to go ahead with this IPO. It looks like the shares should be on the market in about a month's time, so we're looking at early December in Saudi Arabia on the Tadawul Stock Exchange there. Now, the chairman and the CEO gave a press conference yesterday near Saudi Aramco headquarters in Dhahran, that's in eastern Saudi Arabia near the Persian Gulf Coast, and they said that at the moment they're looking only at the Tadawul Stock Exchange listing in Riyadh, so we're not looking at an international listing right now, and they're going to be going through a book building process, so we'll be waiting to find out from that process, what is the price and what is the percentage in the number of shares that they plan to sell.
Well, Anthony, this is crucial because the original plan was 5% on international markets. Now it could be up to 3% of the company on a local stock exchange. Is it just easier to get a bigger valuation if you keep it local and give the powers that be a decent nudge, hard enough maybe, to go and buy the stock?
Well, that's the speculation that it is easier to list in the first place on that exchange because of lower reporting requirements, and that it is easier also to get some of those local investors really to put more money into that company. I mean, it is Saudi Aramco is the crown jewels of the economy there. It's been a state secret for so long how much they produce, what the production levels are, and the numbers behind the company, and so now people are really getting a chance. The domestic investors are really going to be getting a chance to get a piece of that. And so there's also a bit of a national pride issue there. And we've also reported beyond that the government is leaning on some of those high net worth individuals and the rich families, the industrial families in the kingdom, to really plunk down some cash and pony up to support this IPO. We have also reported that they're out looking at some cornerstone investors trying to get some big funds to invest in that IPO to support that price. So it does really go around the valuation. That's the key issue that has been driving this IPO since the Crown Prince announced it about 3 years ago.
So, Anthony, let's talk about valuation. There is a wide range of valuations. I think might be a trillion between the low and the high valuation I've seen out there from some of these investment banks. What's the sense of how this thing's going to play out valuation-wise?
Well, as you say, the valuation is huge. I mean, just to put it in perspective, the difference between the low and the high end that the banks that are working on the IPO, that their analysts themselves have come up with, the spread there is equal to Apple's market cap. So it's a big spread. And, a lot of those analysts are taking different scenarios. The oil price at 60, the oil price at 70, the oil price at 80. They're looking at different scenarios for oil price, oil production, and for the longevity of the company's resources over the years, and that's how they're getting these different ratings. Now, we've spoken to some of the bankers there who see something like 1.6 to 1.8 trillion as possibly where it could be priced. A lot of analysts are saying 1.2 to 1.5 might be more realistic. So the numbers are still really out there. We're continuing to get more information about the company, about the financials, about what the governance and the dividends and the future taxation will be like. There were even some changes announced in the ITF this weekend. So people are still taking these things on board and making their assumptions. And, we will see over the coming weeks what the market says that this company is worth.
Not much of a market, though, is it? If it's only local and it's up to 3%. I mean, that'll be the conversation for the next couple of weeks. I imagine a lot of our listeners would have seen the front page of The Economist over the weekend, the last drop, Saudi strategy, and the end of oil. And Anthony, this is the problem. The signal, I assume, won't be the pitch. The signal is, for the kingdom, they only see the downside as why they're selling. What's the pitch? What's the story for investors?
Well, foreign investors can invest into it through the Saudi Stock Exchange, but as you say, this is a much smaller market than, say, something like London, New York, which were earlier mooted as places for the listing. The Aramco management is really saying, talking about its, and this may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but almost their environmental credentials, in the sense that Saudi crude is very easy to extract from the ground compared to other oil, compared to things like shale or deep offshore oil. So it uses less energy to get that oil out of the ground. It's also very low cost. So they're really pitching themselves as a low emissions to get the oil out of the ground and a low cost to get the oil out of the ground company. Of course, beyond that, as you say, there is the backlash against the internal combustion engine, against climate change, and that is going to potentially reduce the number of investors who can look at something like that, because people don't want to be invested in companies that are contributing to carbon emissions and global warming. So that is a big challenge for this company.
Anthony, it's great to catch up with you. Anthony DePaola there, Bloomberg Middle East Energy Markets reporter. The range from Bank of America, Paul Sweeney, 1.22 trillion to 2.27 trillion. Nobody knows, do they? From New York this morning, good morning to all worldwide. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. With the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ at new record highs, the stock futures are pointing to more gains this morning. Crude oil is climbing. It's just under $57 a barrel this morning. Shares of McDonald's are moving lower before the opening bell. The fast food giant ousted CEO Steve Easterbrook after he admitted to having a consensual relationship with an employee. The burger giant's policy does not allow the CEO to have a relationship with anyone in the company. Under Armour is falling after saying federal officials have been probing its accounting practices for more than 2 years. The company is reporting its earnings this morning. Saudi Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, is going ahead with its long-awaited IPO. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman first raised the idea more than 3 years ago. Overseas European markets are bouncing higher. The Hang Seng also rose today. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills, the kind of skills that companies need to build real products, and the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Here at LNER, we love giving you more value. And we all love more, don't we? More sleep, more sun, more me time. So we've added our new Azuma trains with more seats and more great value fares. In fact, there are 3,773 more £29 single tickets every week on our Azuma trains between London and Leeds. Brilliant. Book direct at lner.co.uk. Launching alongside existing LNER trains.
Drivers, it's time to rise up and step up to a new Vauxhall SUV. With £4,000 guaranteed scrappage or part exchange value with 4.9% APR representative. Drivers, it's time to trade up. Search Vauxhall Trade Up or visit your local Vauxhall retailer now. T's and C's apply. Trade-in car must be registered in your name for at least 90 days. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status 18+ Vauxhall Finance. Other deposit contributions may be available if you don't have a trade-in vehicle. Ends 26th of November. Should we go halves?
I'll get this. Let me just get my card. Which was in my pocket.
You can't control awkward first dates. But if you temporarily misplace your debit card, you can freeze and unfreeze it on our mobile banking app. Feel in control every day. Lloyds Bank. By your side. You can only freeze some transaction types. T's and C's apply.
Hello? This is Dustin. I found something. Is anybody there?
We hear you, Dustin. With Sky Q, you can easily catch up on epic Netflix shows like Stranger Things and then watch award-winning Sky originals like Chernobyl. Get Sky and Netflix all in one place on Sky Q for one surprisingly low price. Just £25 a month. Visit sky.com and join today. Offer ends November 14th. 18-month minimum terms. Prices may change during contract. Requires Sky Q box connected to broadband. Set up from £20. Further terms apply.
This is the sound of festive fun in London. You want to keep your savings for the things you love this Christmas, not a new boiler. We're with you. So our boilers come with 2 years interest-free credit to keep your savings for a Merry Christmas. You'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty, and now we can quote by video call evenings or weekends. Get a quote by the 30th of November and get £150 off a new boiler, or £450 off for existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
15-10-5, touchdown!
Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Giants. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
He's at the 5 on the hash mark, running into the end zone. It is a touchdown. He gets the high snap. He rolls out of the pocket. There's a short pass across the way. It's caught by Albert Wilson at the pylon. He goes into the end zone. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, 2 hours away from the open and bound. The news you need to know this hour. U.S. equity futures gaining as we see the U.S. and China inch closer to a phase one trade deal. This time, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross saying they're working towards signing an agreement this month. Elsewhere, Saudi Arabia officially launching its Aramco IPO in Riyadh next month. Bankers on the deal offer a wide range of valuations, anywhere from $1.2 trillion to $2.3 trillion. McDonald's has fired its CEO. The board voted to terminate Steve Easterbrook because of a consensual relationship he had with an employee. That has shares down 2% in early trading. And finally, Under Armour down by more than 10% in the pre-market. The company disclosed a federal probe into its accounting practices, but denies any wrongdoing. It also announced earnings that missed estimates and cut its full-year forecast. Some of the stories we'll be talking about through the next couple of hours then on Bloomberg Radio. And now time for some headlines from elsewhere. Let's say good morning to Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jonathan. Good morning, Paul. President Trump travels to Kentucky tonight for a campaign rally. his first of 3 rallies this week. He'll also travel to Louisiana and Georgia. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden campaigned yesterday in Sterling, Virginia, with a focus on the Commonwealth's Tuesday General Assembly race. Republicans hold thin majorities in both Virginia's House and Senate. Biden tied the race to President Trump.
Whether we get rid of the most corrupt administration in American history, a guy who has literally sullied the soul of the country, is going to depend on what happens here, because the rest of the world, the rest of the nation is watching you.
Meanwhile, new polls from the New York Times and Siena College show President Trump is competitive in head-to-head matchups with top Democrats in 6 key battleground states. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Jonathan Paul.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much indeed. It's time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report. Here is John Stashower.
John, how bad are things for the Jets? They lost to a team that seemingly doesn't even want to win. The Dolphins traded many of their top players away in order to stockpile draft picks. Sure enough, they were 0-7. They lost their first 4 games by an average of 34 points. But they beat the Jets 26-18. Jets scored a touchdown on their first possession, none after that. Next Sunday, Jets play the Giants. Someone will have to win. Giants play tonight. They host the Cowboys, who they lost to back in week 1. Baltimore last night upset previously unbeaten New England 37-20. Ravens scored the first 17 points and the last 13. The Knicks trounced at home by lowly Sacramento 113-92. The Kings were up 20 at the half. The Knicks are an NBA worst 1-6. Presser at Citi Field today to introduce new Mets manager Carlos Beltran. Jeffrey Kamwer of Kenya won his second New York Marathon, time of 2 hours, 8 minutes, 13 seconds. An upset for the women. Mary Kaitani going for her 5th title, beaten by Jocelyn Jeffkosgei, who was running New York for the first time. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. John?
John Stashower, thank you, sir. John Stashower with us there with the sports. You've had the news. Let's get you some price action, shall we? This Monday morning, equity futures are firmer by 14 points on the S&P 500, up by around about 0.5%. We've had 4 straight weeks of gains, the longest weekly winning streak on the S&P 500, going back to March of this year. Risk appetite improves this morning. It means treasuries are lower and yields are higher by 4 basis points to 175 on a 10-year note. On a 2-year note, your yield right now 1.576%. From New York this morning, alongside Paul Sweeney, I'm Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg Radio. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, you are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance from New York City. For our audience worldwide, equities advance, risk appetite improves. It's time now for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, offering hands-on learning in the largest maker space in New Jersey for those working in manufacturing and mechatronics. More at njit.edu/manufacturing. With the NJIT STEM report, here is Bob Moon.
Jonathan, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. It's one of the most downloaded apps in the world.
Everybody make some TikTok.
And now the U.S. government has launched a national security review of the popular music video service TikTok, owned by Beijing-based ByteDance.
TikTok.
The Chinese company bought Musical.ly, or Musical.ly, 2 years ago for almost $1 billion to merge it with TikTok. It was seen as a way to expand abroad and capitalize on an increasing appetite for short videos. TikTok has since become wildly popular, one of the few Chinese internet companies to catch on in the U.S. Enter the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., CFIUS for short, which reviews deals by foreign acquirers for potential national security risks. A person familiar with the investigation says CFIUS is looking into the merger amid increasing concern about TikTok's growing influence. Some U.S. lawmakers have been referring to TikTok as a potential counterintelligence threat we cannot ignore. Senators Chuck Schumer and Tom Cotton wrote to Acting National Intelligence Director Joseph McGuire, citing concerns including the safety of data on the platform, potential censorship, and possible foreign influence campaigns in the U.S. Senator Marco Rubio wrote to the Treasury Department saying he's deeply concerned the platform could amass data on millions of unsuspecting users.
Don't be scared.
TikTok, known for teenage twerking and singing gummy bears, said in a statement it has no higher priority than earning the trust of users and regulators in the U.S. and is committed to working with Congress. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Jonathan.
Bob Moon, thank you. Always seem to be finding myself saying thank you to Bob Moon. I'm not sure if I mean it or not. after those segments, but we do appreciate it, Bob. Thank you very much. Let's get you your 5 things, shall we? The 5 things you need to know to start your day. It's brought to you by Portfolio Analysts, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analysts to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Download for free at ibkr.com/PA. Paul, let's begin with trade, shall we? The happy talk continues.
Talk. Phase 1 happy talk. And I think phase 1, it seems to be on the right track. We seem to be making progress, and the market certainly likes that. We've seen this day in and day out. Trade is really driving market sentiment here.
And Secretary Ross talking things up in an interview with Haslinder Amin, I believe, over the weekend over in Asia, talking about Huawei and licenses for American companies to sell to Huawei coming back soon. That just looks like another sign of the pressure coming off from the U.S. side.
It seems to be. I think you're absolutely right here, and I think it just shows both sides here would love to get this phase 1 deal done. It's not that hard of a deal to get done. There's not the big issues that they need to negotiate. Let's get some soybeans.
We caught up with Rich Clarida, the vice chairman. We didn't talk to him about soybeans in the last week. When he spoke to us on Friday, he sounded really optimistic. Monetary policy's in a good place. The economy's in a good place. But I imagine for many economists, Paul, the jury's still out.
I think so. I think in your conversation with Larry Kudlow as well, I think that the folks at the Fed, folks at the administration feel like this soft landing is being negotiated fairly well right here. So the consumer continues to be, the stalwart of this economy.
On an extremely narrow runway, they're trying to execute a very difficult, complex soft landing. Paul Aramco, you mentioned this. The range of valuations, Bank of America being one, it's not their fault. There are loads of other banks doing the same thing. Nobody knows. There's a range of 1.22 trillion all the way out to 2.27 trillion for the valuation of this company.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting now that they're not doing it on a major global exchange such as New York or London or Hong Kong. They're doing it on the local Saudi exchange. So that kind of questions what kind of valuation they can get, what kind of price discovery will really take place during this offering. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of how the investment banks bring this to market.
I mean, I joke about this, but part of it's true. You do the road show at the Ritz. You invite the same people that you trapped there last time around. You float 3% of the company. Maybe you raise about $60 billion. Boom. You've got the valuation the Crown Prince wants without really opening it up to market forces.
That's right. That's right. So, as this stock trades, I mean, this is going to have to be a global offering. And, the price discovery will take place in the market, but it's just not going to be right at that initial point that you would get in New York or London.
Should we get to the Brit, who's in a bit of trouble? Steve Easterbrook of McDonald's. What a fantastic story leading this company, almost doubling the stock and then brought down by their own rules of the company.
Sure. And, Mike Halen of Bloomberg Intelligence, he covers all the restaurants, and he says this CEO of McDonald's may be the best restaurant CEO in the business. So it's a big issue for the company.
A consensual relationship he had with an employee. No indication as yet that I've seen whether it's a direct report or somewhere else within the company.
But they have a very strict policy, I guess.
Rules at McDonald's, no relationships whatsoever. A company that's also in the spotlight, Under Armour. So essentially, they've had to disclose a federal probe into the accounting practices. They've denied any wrongdoing here, Paul, but the stock is down and down hard.
It's down hard. I mean, I think this seems to be pretty serious. It seems to be a couple of years in the making that some of these the regulators were looking at this company. So again, you see this time and time again with these companies with accounting issues, and where there's smoke, oftentimes there tends to be fire.
The timeline just doesn't look good for someone from the outside looking in, and I look forward to getting even more clarity on this, but they had 20% sales growth for several years going into 2016, then boom, it stops. And from 2016 to 17, 3 CFOs taking a look at the book, coming in the company, then leaving, and now we've got some problems. The CEO leaving as well in the last month too. A corporate story we'll get you up to speed on a little bit later in the program. From New York alongside Paul Sweeney, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Tom Keane taking a day off. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sport.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and enjoy stunning white sand and crystal blue sea. Fly from London Gatwick to the Maldives with British Airways from £300 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
Whether you're waiting for a train or a takeaway, with Tesco Mobile you don't have to wait for a brilliant deal. Our best ever Black Friday event is on. This week you can get a Samsung Galaxy A50 for just $17.49 a month. That's our lowest ever price. Get yours by the 10th of November. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Best ever Black Friday based on range of products in promotion was £18.99, now £17.49. 36-month credit agreement, rolling monthly usage agreement, subject to status, various policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
TuneIn would like to congratulate the 2019 World Series champion Washington Nationals.
Swing and a miss! And a World Series Game 7 winning Curly W is in the books! The celebration is on! The Washington Nationals are the world champions!
Yeah, before the game, I said, hey, I want you guys to just treat this as just another game. You know, one more 1-0, and they did that tonight.
To catch all the exciting sports that TuneIn has, make sure to search sports today.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
What if you could keep up with cable news even when you're on the go? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to MSNBC live without any commercial interruptions. All of the news, none of the ads. Listen live on TuneIn Premium today.
24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Iran today breaking away further from its collapsing 2015 nuclear deal with world powers by announcing it is doubling the number of advanced centrifuges it operates. Iran calls the decision a direct result of President Trump withdrawing the U.S. from the deal and reimposing sanctions. World Series champions, the Washington Nationals, had their parade, and today is the traditional visit to the White House, but at least one of the Nats won't be there, as we hear from Joe Johns.
That's Sean Doolittle. He's a pitcher. Here's a quote. There's a lot of things, policies he says he disagrees with, but at the end of
of the day, it has more to do with the divisive rhetoric and the enabling of conspiracy theories and the widening the divide of this country. As much as I wanted to be there with my teammates and share that experience with my teammates, he says, I can't do it.
The impeachment inquiry enters a crucial phase today with 11 witnesses called for this week. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton says he won't appear without a subpoena. Stock futures gaining across the boards ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. I'm Michael Toscano.
Carol Masser.
Where do IPOs fit into all of this?
Jason Kelly.
Talk to us about the market technology business.
Bloomberg Business Week.
What are the drivers underneath there?
Have a better week. Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Still watching shares of Under Armour down more than 13% this morning after the company disclosed that federal officials have been probing its accounting practices for more than 2 years, bringing a fresh headache to investors just as a sports brand prepares for a CEO transition. The athletic wear company also lowered its full-year revenue forecast, but it did raise some other projections after posting solid third-quarter results. Ferrari raised its guidance for the year after third-quarter profit beat expectations. Stryker agreed to acquire Wright Medical Group in a deal that'll help bulk up the U.S. company at a time when the medical device industry is growing more concentrated. U.S. stock index futures on the rise. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 14 points. Dow futures up 124. NASDAQ futures up 47. The DAX in Germany's up 1.25%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds. Yield 1.74%. Yield on the 2-year 1.57%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.3% or 74 cents at 56.94 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.25% or $3.70 at 15.15.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1159 against the dollar. British pound 1.2913, and the yen is at 108.40. And McDonald's is down 2% after firing its chief executive. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Don and Paul.
Karen, thank you very much. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. We start the week in a way we've started the week so many times before through 2019. Trade talks, and apparently the optimism improves once again. We've called it happy talk over the last couple of hours, Paul Sweeney, but actually it looks like this is beginning to form into somewhat of a truce here.
It looks like,
relative to where we were 2 months ago, this is a massive improvement.
It really is, and it's just a question of, do both sides need a deal? And I think what we've heard from a lot of our guests over the last several weeks is both sides really do need a deal. And there are certainly, you can break down the phase one versus the phase two. And phase one, I think most people can agree upon. These are some things we can get done. We can get some purchases of agricultural products and so on and so forth. We can get some loosening of restrictions in China. There's some things that in a phase one deal seem to be virtually gettable if both sides want to get a deal done. And that's, I think, where we're going right now. But of course, anything can change on a tweet.
This is the easy stuff.
Yes.
And the way this has played out so many times over the last 18 months, you address the easy stuff, you form what looks like a truce. We saw this in February of this year. Then the difficult stuff comes back on the table and the whole thing blows up again. The difference for a lot of people, I think, going into 2020 is that somehow the election story means that this doesn't blow up again because the president won't want it to.
That's exactly right. I think he wants to be able to say to his electorate, to his base in the election that, he played tough with the Chinese. He got a deal, and we're moving forward. Again, this was the centerpiece of his election in 2016.
So we bring in Seema Shah, Principal Global Advisors, Chief Strategist. She joins us on the phone. Seema, your thoughts, please, on why this movie doesn't end the way it has done so many times over the last 18 months.
Yeah, this trade deal stuff is, I think the market's getting a little bit optimistic, but then at the same time, the stars do seem to be aligning that we will see some kind of concessions coming through. And it feels that the Trump administration is actually getting relatively desperate compared to how they've sounded in the past. Now, I think for the market in general, though, the biggest thing that they're going to be watching out for is those December the 15th tariffs. Do they go ahead or not? If they don't, then it's a great news for the consumer. And ultimately for the overall economy, for the U.S. economy, that is all that matters at the moment. So I think if we do get any good news on that side, you should see a relatively large market rally just off the back of that.
I talked to Larry Kudlow on Friday, the National Economic Council Director, Seema. He did say that those tariffs for December were still on the table. You do get the impression, though, that if we sign a phase one trade deal, that goes away. Seema, what Paul and I were talking about, though, is that when you get to the thornier issues that the Chinese just won't budge on, this typically blows up again. Going into 2020, is it different this time around?
Yeah, I think it is slightly different. I mean, I agree that I think the longer-term structural issues are very unlikely to be resolved, and we're not going to see a full trade deal that maybe some people are expecting. But the Trump administration is now going into election year. The U.S. economy is weak. Some people still expect recession. So they need some kind of deal going into this. And given that we've had so much focus on the consumer, I think that is all that matters at this moment. But beyond that, the technology side, I think, is very unlikely to resolve, not only in 2020, but even looking forward. If you're looking, beyond into the next kind of 3 or 4 years, that is going to be an agenda which continues with whoever the next government is, or indeed if it's a Trump administration continuing.
So, Seema, you mentioned the consumer here. We had some pretty good jobs numbers last week. Give us your sense of how much of this economy is really dependent upon the consumer. We know the consumer is 70% of the U.S. economy, but with the manufacturing sector weak, business investment weak, it seems like there's more pressure than ever on the consumer. What's your read of the consumer?
No, I would absolutely agree. It is all about the consumer at the moment. At this stage, I think they've held up relatively well. I think we should expect to see some continued weakness in Q4. Mainly because of those tariffs really starting to have, almost taking their toll. But looking beyond that, the jobless claims numbers, I think they're really positive, and they're telling us that the consumer may be able to withstand a lot of this. Now, with the Fed also keeping rates so low, everything is working in order to keep the consumer going. But I don't think they're going to stay as strong as they have. I think there's some weakness, but I don't think it's going to fall over the edge where you have the consumer then bringing the U.S. into recession. So on that basis, I think the market outlook is relatively positive.
Is this a good entry point for the rest of the world, ex-US? We talked earlier on the programme about how actually Europe has started to outperform. The DAX is up 24% through 2019 already, Seema. Why is this a moment, if you do indeed think it is, to actually start to reallocate some capital away from the United States to the rest of the world?
There's a whole host of reasons at this stage. If you look at Europe, for example, as you said, valuations are relatively more attractive than almost anywhere else in the world. If you do expect the manufacturing side to at least be troughing, you've taken off all of the worries about Brexit. A lot of the worries about Italy are kind of in the background at the moment. So this is a decent time. And then you also have the ECB, which is very, very accommodative, and it doesn't look like it's going to be reversed. Plus, you potentially have fiscal stimulus on the agenda. So the outlook for Europe is improving. And on emerging markets, if we now think that the dollar is at its peak and is going to be at least on a slight weakening trend from here, this is a time that emerging markets can start to look really attractive. You have to pick your country wisely still, as it will be the case for as long as the global economy is even slightly weak. But if you're an investor and you're allocating around, you have to be cautious. But there are still many opportunities outside of the US that investors should start considering.
So, Seema, this is, I guess, the last big week of earnings releases. What is your takeaway so far this season?
It's been better than we expected. I think that's been the case almost all around. We had been, if you look at the economic data, for example, just the PMI New Orders Index, that was suggesting that we'd be looking at an earnings recession right now. That hasn't been the case, and I think that the market has really, it's helped out the companies that have beaten expectations. The market response has been very positive, and yet the ones that have disappointed have been totally beaten up. So there is still a lot of caution out there. I don't think this is the end. I think Q4, you could see further weakness in earnings, but I think Q1 for 2020 is going to be a much, much better quarter.
This is such a polarised debate right now. I caught up with Bob Michael of JP Morgan Asset Management to end last week, and he was really blunt with me, and he said the following: the Fed is behind the curve. They overestimate the probability of compromise on the trade front. They underestimate the spillover impact from manufacturing to services and employment. The next leg of the bond bull market has commenced. Seema, what's the pushback to that?
I mean, I don't know if there's a pushback, but I think maybe they're a little bit early to the game on this one. When we look at the bond market, if you just look at the yield curve inversion, yes, it is signaling recession ahead, but I don't think it's signaling recession in 2020. But there are problems building up. So I think that 2020 is a decent year. But you go into 2021, and there are the bubbles of the corporate debt side, which now people are starting to take more notice of. So, yeah, perhaps the Fed is doing everything that it can. I think don't necessarily believe that they're behind the curve. I think they've struggled with their communication, and I think they've struggled because of the difficulty reading the trade situation. I don't necessarily think they're behind the curve. But what I think from here is that when we get into 2020, if by the end of 2020 you have a weakness in the economy coming through, and you have a little monetary stimulus left, and you have little power on the fiscal stimulus side, then I think things start to go bad. But I do believe that 2020 is a good year. 2021 might be a completely different story, though.
So, Seema, are we defensive right here? Some of those defensive sectors that we hear about a lot, utilities, REITs, consumer staples, they're not cheap.
No, they're absolutely not cheap. And the thing that we've been saying is that you need to maintain your defensive exposure because, look, although we don't expect the recession to come through next year, we think there's a slowdown in play. At the same time, because we believe that you're coming to the trough in the global economic slowdown, this is the time to start thinking about increasing slightly your exposure to cyclicals. The ones that we like, technology and financials. We think there's going to be a steepening yield curve as you go into next year, and that should play with financials. And typically when you do see an economic upturn, even if it's very modest, people usually tend to rush for technology. But I think you do need to be cautious. We would not be necessarily talking very well about consumer discretionary at this stage because of, we see some weakness coming through for the consumer in Q4. But this is the time to start thinking about rotating a little bit into cyclicals.
Seema, thank you. Always great to catch up with you. Seema Shah there, Principal Global Advisors, Chief Strategist, dropping by the studio with Paul Sweeney and myself. It's like herding cats when I'm with Tom Keane, so they've decided to throw you into the mix as well.
Yeah, well,
Lisa Brammitz, hello.
Hello, am I a cat? What kind of cat am I?
A wild one?
Don't answer, actually. I was just about to say, please, let's
hard to herd.
An unherdable cat.
Right.
Wow, well, good morning.
Your comebacks in the schoolyard must have been really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, what a Monday. Risk on, very risk on.
Lisa's joining us through the next hour. Looking forward to it. Alongside Paul Sweeney, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Equity futures are positive, up 14 on the S&P 500.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and relax with 365 beautiful beaches.
So yes, sir, what would you like to have?
Fly from London Gatwick to Antigua with British Airways from £223 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Tune In would like to congratulate the 2019 World Series champion Washington Nationals.
Swing and a miss! And a World Series Game 7 winning Curly W is in the books. The celebration is on. The Washington Nationals are the world champions.
Before the game, I said, hey, I want you guys to just treat this as just another game. One more 1-0, and they did that tonight.
To catch all the exciting sports that TuneIn has, make sure to search sports today.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification.
It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keane and Jonathan Ferro on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, Secretary Ross, the latest US official, talking up trade talks. The Aramco IPO is on. Saudi Arabia planning to list the world's largest oil producer in Riyadh. And after almost doubling the stock, CEO Easterbrook out of McDonald's for violating company policy. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, hello Monday. Here is your Monday morning price action with equity futures up 14 points. We're positive 0.5% on the S&P 500. Risk appetite improves. Treasuries drop. Yields pop by 5 basis points on a 10-year to 176 on a 2-year note. 158. Tom Keene out of the studio today. He'll be back with us tomorrow. I am joined by Paul Sweeney and dropping by the studio, Bloomberg's Lisa Abramowitz. Good morning to you guys.
Good morning, absolutely. Who gave Tom Keene the day off?
Tom Keene, I think, gave himself the day off.
Okay,
which is
works.
rare. He's actually started to take vacation this year. He would always abuse me for how much holiday I was racking up through the year. I can tell you that Tom is ahead of me for 2019.
Oh, very good.
Not like you're keeping track literally of every single hour.
I'm pretty much keeping track every single day he takes a day off.
I think it goes further than that. It gets granular. And what a day. And of course, we all had to just pack in here to try to fill in for his absence, Craig.
4 weeks of gains. We're going to avoid that. Otherwise, he'll start sending me emails saying we're abusing his weight, his height, and all those things. Longest weekly winning streak since March, guys, and trade front and centre, Paul. And we've been talking about this. Our interview with Secretary Wilbur Ross, for me, it's less about the happy talk and the mood music and much more about the substance. Reintroducing those licenses for American companies to supply Huawei. Just another sign they're backing away.
Right, and you know, the Huawei was such a contentious issue here because if you think about it, for China, Huawei is just, you know, one of their most important companies, corporations in all of China. That really hits close to home. So to the extent that they're getting some leniency there, that might be pushing the ball forward here.
And yesterday afternoon, Lisa, it was company after company with a couple of problems. Started with McDonald's, then Under Armour. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with a statistic that I found rather stunning. PricewaterhouseCoopers did this, and basically for the first time in 19 years, last year saw more CEOs at big companies fired for ethical lapses than because of boards kicking them out or financial issues. That to me is stunning.
Wow.
And it sort of indicates this sort of sea change in the C-suite with respect to ethical behavior. And it raises a question, and Gina Martin Adams was really smart on that this morning. It raises a question, is this good for corporate performance or does this disrupt the leadership?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Michael Halen from Bloomberg Intelligence, who covers restaurants and covers McDonald's, says that this CEO for McDonald's who just stepped down is arguably the best CEO in the restaurant business. So it just shows you how serious the board at McDonald's and a lot of other corporations takes this issue.
Consensual relationship with an employee. Company policy is essentially no relationship with any employee whatsoever. And Steve Easterbrook has to leave. But to Paul's point, Lisa, almost doubling the stock in his tenure there.
What's interesting to me, so I asked Gina Martin Adams, isn't this bad, right? And she said, well, actually, over a longer period of time, companies, when they follow certain ethical standards, their downside is lower. Right. So when they're stricter to this, even if in the short run it might be disrupting leadership that's widely been thought of as great, in the long run, it's better for the company.
We'll talk about McDonald's a little bit later on in the program. Pleased to say that Bloomberg Surveillance this morning is presented by Cohn Resnick. Transform your tax game. The Cohn Resnick team can help deal makers develop a winning tax strategy. Visit cohnresnick.com/tax insight. Pleased to say also joining us on the phone, Greg Vanier, AGF Investments Chief US Policy Strategist. Good morning to you, Greg. Your thoughts, please, on where we are with this trade debate.
I have, first of all, hats off to the Bloomberg website that had over the weekend the story about company-specific deals like Huawei. I think that's a really important breakthrough. I think that we're within weeks of a summit between Trump and Xi, I think before the December 15th deadline.
So there is this feeling that we've sort of crossed the Rubicon here and we're more likely to get a deal. Is it soon enough to stave off the damage?
Well, there has been damage, obviously, in the last year or so, but I think that farmers and small businesses that have been hurt hard by the tariffs can rebound. I think they're going to have some predictability. I think this is still another really good story for the markets.
So, Greg, I mean, we're calling this a phase one deal, maybe a trade light deal. How do you let's assume this gets done and it gets signed by President Trump and Xi? What is the likelihood for a phase 2 type of deal?
I think it's pretty dim. They're going to leave the heavy lifting for 2020, whether it's intellectual property theft or Chinese subsidies of state-owned companies. Those are big issues, and I think that's going to take a long time. However, you know that Trump is going to proclaim that the phase 1 deal in a few weeks is the greatest deal ever, and he'll try to spin this as a fundamental turning point, and he may really gain some political standing on this.
Greg, I sense there might be some disappointment amongst even the supporters of the President of the United States, supporting him through this whole push with the Chinese and then backing away with very little concession to be seen. What are the concessions coming from the Chinese?
Well, huge agricultural purchases would be number one, maybe opening up some markets. But I think you're right, John. I think whether it's Chuck Schumer or Peter Navarro, from one extreme to another on this trade story, I think both camps are going to argue that we went through a lot in the last year and got very little in return.
Ambassador Lighthizer too. We're talking about ag purchases that maybe go back to levels from a couple of years ago, Greg. This is all stuff we've had before. I've pushed back against many people that have criticized the president for going after the Chinese to open up markets. Many economists have agreed with me that it was the right thing to do. Yet, Greg, I'm not quite sure what we've got out of this if this deal doesn't go to phase 2, phase 3. I sit here wondering that if this starts to resonate with the president, that maybe those around him start to sound disappointed, perhaps the base are disappointed too, that he hasn't done enough, that this blows up again. Do you get the sense, though, going into 2020, Greg, that this is different this time around and that this truce won't blow up?
I think the worst is over. That's the key point. It's not going to immediately become a great story, but I think more tariffs, more acrimony are unlikely. I think that's a plus for the markets. I think that's a plus for Trump.
Well, you were talking, Greg, about the Bloomberg interview with Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross over the weekend, where he spoke specifically about Huawei and that the de facto blacklisting of Huawei might loosen slightly in the near future. While this does indicate a softening in trade ties, I'm wondering what that says about sort of the Department of Justice and the division between that and trade negotiations. I mean, isn't this sort of clear merging of the two kind of roles and directives?
Well, I think it's a good point, Lisa. I think in addition to the Justice Department investigation, you've got a real unrest on Capitol Hill. If Huawei were to suddenly get a great deal, a lot of members of Congress, including a lot of Republicans like Marco Rubio, would be opposed.
So, Greg, to date, as you mentioned, some of the parts of the U.S. economy that have been negatively impacted by the tariffs and trade war have been parts of President Trump's base, farmers, for example. It doesn't appear that it's necessarily impacted him negatively. Is that your view as well?
I was beginning to think that Trump would have to spend time and money in Iowa and Missouri. I think if we do get this phase 1 deal, he won't have to spend so much time there. I think he goes back to being the favorite in that part of the country.
Hey, Greg, just split this up for me, 100%. Are you experiencing conversations with clients that are 50% about trade and 50% about aggressive left-wing policies going into 2020? Or are we seeing more than one or the other going into next year?
Good question. The fear over an Elizabeth Warren presidency has subsided a lot. She can't explain credibly how she'd pay for Medicare for all.
Interesting.
I think the fear over trade had persisted for quite a while. I predict it starts to abate over the next few weeks.
Hey, Greg, great to catch up with you. As always, Greg Valliere there, AGF Investments Chief U.S. Policy Strategist. She had some difficulties over the weekend, didn't she, Paul? Explaining how to fund some of these big policies.
Exactly, and I think that's where it's going to come. And so the question for the Democrats is, okay, you can talk a big game here in the primaries, for example, in the debates, but at some point, do you need to come back to the center?
There's sort of a hard needle to thread here, and this is something that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was trying to do with David Weston last week, where on one hand, they want to show that the economy isn't doing as well as President Trump would like to make it seem because of the health care issue, but on the other hand, they don't want to make healthcare the front and center because their supporters are already going to support them, and they're just going to alienate President Trump's base.
Taxes will only go up for billionaires. Did you see that?
Yes.
At last count from Forbes, 607 billionaires in America. Taxes are only going up on 607 people.
Yeah. And is that going to pay for all the
Yeah, I don't think anyone was convinced by that over the weekend. That pressure on Senator Warren will continue, no doubt. We'll continue to cover it for you from this morning. Good morning to you all. Equity futures do advance. The optimism up a little bit following Friday's solid report. Positive 15 points on the S&P 500, up around about 0.5% from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Paul, Jonathan, Lisa, thank you very much. The head of Iran's nuclear program says that Tehran is working on a prototype centrifuge that is 50 times faster than those allowed under the nuclear deal with world powers. Today's comments came as Iranians marked the 40th anniversary of the 1979 U.S. Embassy takeover and started the 444-day hostage crisis. Hong Kong police say a knife-wielding man who slashed two people and bit off part of the ear of a politician during weekend protests has been arrested. The World Series champs, the Washington Nationals, will visit the White House today, but at least one Nationals player has already said he plans to skip the event. Pitcher Sean Doolittle, who's been outspoken in his support for immigrants and the LGBTQ community, said that he cannot go to the White House because of Trump's rhetoric. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Jonathan.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. This Monday, futures advance following 4 straight weeks of gains on the S&P 500. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 8-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This winter, why not take a short flight from London to Dublin with Aer Lingus from just $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. From coastal walks to cozy pubs and friendly locals, you'll find so much to enjoy once you're there. Smart takes a Dublin city break. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Terms and conditions apply.
With the new Halifax Family Boost mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home, and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner. The new Halifax Family Boost mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
We didn't make Nature Valley crunchy bars so you could just sit and scoff them in front of the TV. Not when you could be enjoying them outdoors. Up here! Race it to the top! with 100% whole grain oats and delicious honey. Nature Valley Crunchy. Get out more.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
ESPN Radio and TuneIn just go hand in hand. Hi, this is Mel Kiper Jr. reminding you that all of your favorite ESPN Radio shows and events are right here on TuneIn. Just search ESPN Radio to begin enjoying it today.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs on Bloomberg Technology.
Shopify is spending $1 billion to set up a network of fulfillment centers in the U.S. to help its merchants deliver products. The Ottawa-based e-commerce company is one of Canada's best-performing stocks. Shopify CEO, it's Toby Lutka, sat down with my colleague Caroline Hyde at the Sooner Than You Think conference in New York. How do you find the constant competition coming from Amazon and the need of your clients being somewhat different?
One of the most wonderful things is inspired discontent of all the shoppers and all the merchants, always holding us to the highest standards, and we will strive to, like, if teleportation is invented tomorrow, we'll use that to deliver all packages, but failing that, we'll try to get things to everyone in 2 days.
What sort of technological innovation and focus do you think there will be are you seeing drones on your horizon anytime soon?
I think the most important thing is that packages and all these kind of things have to travel by any means possible, right? Like, we can go futuristic to drones, we can go really old school to bicycle couriers. We have to learn as an industry how to utilize all those opportunities. I think we can move on a little bit through technology.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 8:17 on Wall Street, and futures are moving higher this morning. Let's go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. U.S. futures are maintaining their gains since the last time we spoke, with Dow futures up 129 points. S&P's gained 15, while NASDAQ futures climbed by 52. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.75%. Gold is little changed. Oil is trading higher, and Taiwan rose 1.4% overnight to the highest since 1990. European markets are also trading higher with 1% gains across the board. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, durable goods orders. Regarding earnings this morning, Ferrari raised the guidance for 2019. And in other news, McDonald's is down pre-market after firing their CEO over an employee relationship. And Under Armour is plunging 13% in the pre-market after disclosing a U.S. accounting probe. In deal news, Stryker to acquire Wright Medical for $30.75 per share, and Patterson Energy to be acquired for $26.75 a share. Wrapping things up, Harley-Davidson was cut to underweight at KeyBank, McDonald's cut to neutral at Piper, and Verizon cut to neutral over at Nomura Instinet. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. John, Paul, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Invesco. Every day they bring together ideas with technology, data with inspiration, and investors with solutions. Invesco, greater possibilities together. Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Inc. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. Good morning to you all. Equities bouncing and firing up hard. McDonald's down by just 1.67%. Steve Easterbrook, the CEO, no longer. On the phone, I'm pleased to say, Sarah Senatore, Sanford Bernstein, Senior Research Analyst. Good morning to you, Sarah. What's the message for clients after this firing?
Good morning. The message is that, from what we can tell, his, Easterbrook's successor Chris Kaczynski was, intimately a part of the strategic decisions and setting the strategy for the next few years. He started as the head of global strategy and business development, so he basically co-authored the company's Vision 2020 plan. He's about as as involved as a person could be in having set the strategy and now having seen it through for the last couple of years as president of the U.S. business.
So, interesting, Sarah. Give us a sense of what's going on at McDonald's here. I see the stock up only about 9% this year. Give us a sense of how they're positioned in the marketplace right now, strengths and weaknesses.
They are, a leading QSR. I think their business has been quite solid. And if you look at the same-store sales numbers, which is usually the first metric that investors look at. So, they've had a very good year-to-date performance, both within the U.S., where it's been same-store sales growth of around 5%, and also even better, arguably, internationally, where the same-store sales growth has been even higher. So the strategies that they have been affecting over the last couple of years are working in driving, increased sales in their stores. The challenge this year has been there's been a lot of reinvestment, but I think in general, what we have seen is when McDonald's reinvests, or when any large company reinvests ahead of the industry, it tends to pay dividends over time. And I think that's why we are seeing sustained higher pace of same-store sales growth out of the company.
Do you think that in general, for a long-term outlook of a company like McDonald's, that it's better to take swift action and boot a popular, successful chief executive officer who has really led the business forward versus taking a step back and trying to figure out perhaps another path?
Well, I think this is the policy McDonald's has, and nobody is above reproach, I think. So they did what they have to do, and I think to your point, having certainty is always better.
The market is down, but it's not down a lot. I assume that many people think that we have a continuity candidate in the hot seat, and this continues. Raymond James pointing out this morning that McDonald's has one of the deepest and longest tenured management teams. Sarah, is that what you see too? And how important is that going to be in the coming years?
Well, I think it's if you look at their management team and you look at the biographies that are online, it's hard to argue that they don't have a very good management team. The new head of the U.S. has been there at McDonald's since 2002, so a very long tenured. He was previously running the international operated markets, so these are the markets outside the U.S. where they have a lot of company operated stores. And I think any of the other members of the C team, if you look at them, with a few exceptions, have been at McDonald's for quite a long time, 25 years in the case of the head of the international development license market. So I always think having a deep bench is critical, especially when you have some transition at the very top. You want to make sure that the kind of day-to-day operations don't get overlooked in that process. And I think having very tenured people who have been in their roles or similar roles for a long time is important.
Let's get to the day-to-day ops. There seems to be a little bit of tension at the moment between the headquarters, corporate policy coming down from the C-suite, and the franchisees. How big is that tension at the moment, Sarah, and how difficult will it be for Kaczynski to resolve it?
Well, I think they have resolved a lot of it, or at least from what we can observe, that's been the case. So there's no question when they first rolled out some of these initiatives in the U.S., they were asking franchisees to do a lot, remodel their stores. They had changes in the field leadership or the way they organized it. They were changing how they were approaching media buying. There was a lot to swallow, pardon the pun, all at once. And so I think what we've observed is that, Chris Kaczynski went on a listening tour last year, really talked to the operators, made some concessions. In the end, not a lot has changed because I think the operators saw that the strategy was the right one. So if you look at the pace of the deployment of Experience of the Future, it's really very similar to the initial timeline they rolled out, even though they've given franchisees a couple more years to get this done and still receive some subsidies from McDonald's. So I would say, if you look at operating measures, customer satisfaction's at all-time highs. If you look at financial metrics, franchisee cash flows are better than they were last year and approaching the all-time highs of 2017. So I think they're in a pretty good place.
Sarah, great to catch up with you. Appreciate your time this morning. I'm sure it's exceptionally busy at the moment for you. Sarah Senator there, Sanford Bernstein Senior Research Analyst on McDonald's. Their stock is lower by 1.81%. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Shares of McDonald's are moving lower after the company fired its CEO. Brooke admitted to having a consensual relationship with an employee against company policy. Under Armour is down 13% after disclosing that 2 federal agencies are investigating its accounting practices. And Apple is pledging $2.5 billion to address the housing crisis in California. Stock futures point to a higher Wall Street open, with the S&P and the NASDAQ at new record highs after trading on Friday. S&P futures up 14, NASDAQ futures up 40. Dow futures up 125 points. Crude oil is up 1% at $56.81 a barrel. Saudi Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, is going ahead with its long-awaited IPO. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman first raised the idea more than 3 years ago. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry parallel with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform, data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the line jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs, small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and enjoy stunning white sand and crystal blue sea. Fly from London Gatwick to the Maldives with British Airways from £300 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
With the new Halifax Family Boost mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home, and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner. The new Halifax Family Boost mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
Can I have chemo at home?
It's only suitable for a couple of types of cancer.
When you search one question about cancer, you end up with millions of results which contradict each other. For clear and uncomplicated information, come to Cancer Research UK. Visit us online or give us a call on 0808 800 40 40. Cancer Research UK. Together, we will beat cancer.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Your economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network for the 6th straight time. J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Lisa Abramowitz, we're light on the data front this week, just a little bit here and there.
A little bit, but certainly consumer comfort. We'll get a number of reads on that, including the U-Michigan Sentiment Index on Friday. I think this is actually going to be interesting, more so than usual, because there is so much focus on consumers and how long they can keep powering the economy. Also, we're going to get some JOLTS data as well as non-manufacturing ISM figures.
And factory orders coming up at 10 a.m. Eastern. Don't miss that. Front and center, a global risk rally for equity markets. That's your top story this morning. Let's bring in Brendan Murray, shall we, from London, who's in charge of all things trade here at Bloomberg. And once again, Brendan, trade front and center. Now, for many of our listeners who have heard this again and again and again, a phase one deal is so close to being signed. Are we any closer this time around?
It seems like we are closer. The only thing that seems to be left to figure out is where they're going to do it. I shouldn't say that. There are a lot of details left to figure out, but one of the main ones now is what's the backdrop going to be? This is such a symbolic thing for both countries to sign this first step of a broader trade deal that, it will mean a lot where it actually happens. Trump obviously will want to, say this was a promise, a campaign promise that he's keeping, and President Xi Jinping is going to want to show that he's able to work with Trump on something like a trade deal.
So interesting here. One of the questions I think is, where is this going to happen? I know there's some politics involved here. Is it going to be part of a state visit? What are you hearing the latest?
What we're hearing is that China is willing to consider U.S. locations for Xi Jinping to come and sign a deal if they can get close to signing. Some of the places that U.S. officials have talked about are in Iowa. President Xi has been to Iowa in his past to talk to the agriculture industry, and the commodities that China needs to buy. So he's familiar with Iowa. Alaska has been talked about for logistical reasons between the two countries, and Hawaii as well. We don't really know yet. It could be in Washington. From our reporting, a state visit at the White House is unlikely to happen. That would be a big formal acknowledgement of China's emergence on the global economy. And President Trump, while he probably wants to sign a trade deal, he's probably not willing to invite the president of an authoritarian communist country to the White House.
What are the hang-ups at this point? Why don't they have a deal today?
That's a good question. The problem with trade deals is you can get 80% of the way to complete, and you still have 20%, and that can be the hardest 20%. We're dealing with documents that need to be translated, words that need to be very precise, could rather than should, and things that really matter in the long run if you're going to hold the other party accountable for what they've agreed to.
I ask this question continually on Friday with Larry Kudlow. What are the hang-ups? What are the specifics? No answer, Brendan, whatsoever. And a discussion we've had through the morning here on Bloomberg Radio is whether the movie that we've seen a couple of times over the last 18 months, a truce followed by a blow-up, repeats, whether we see this again, whether they get past phase one, get to the harder, thornier issues, and once again it just blows up phase one. Is that how you see this playing out, or do you see differences this time around?
I think this time around, both sides have a real incentive to come away with something, even if it's just, some warmed over pledges, from the past 18 months that, that they come together and they say, this is what we're calling a deal. The economies of both countries are slowing. The U.S., probably less so than China is, but, the pressure is really building for Donald Trump in particular to go into his re-election year next year with an economy that has a full head of steam. And if he can't come away with a deal this time, there are tariffs in place to go in effect in mid-December on the rest of Chinese imports, 250 billion worth. So that'll hit consumers. So both sides are incentivized pretty highly right now to put a deal together.
Some breaking news just crossing. India says it won't join the China-backed regional trade agreement. This is coming at a time when China is trying to get an upper hand in the region and organize some sort of ex-U.S. agreement. Brendan, how significant is this?
It is significant. It is also very kind of early in the process of putting that big regional trade agreement together. This is what happens when a country like the U.S. withdraws from the rest of the world. The rest of the world tries to carry on and do business together, even if it means without the U.S. So it sounds to me from the reporting that you're talking about is that India still is not ready to expose some of its own domestic industries to maybe even Chinese imports that would threaten India's domestic industries. So that one still, it's not close to being finished by any means. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But it's just another example that the U.S. As the U.S. turns more protectionist, the rest of the world is moving on.
Hey, Brendan, always great to get your thoughts. Brendan Murray there, joining us out of London. Our all-trade expert here at Bloomberg. Always great to get his thoughts. We are coming off the back of a tailwind coming from some decent payrolls numbers in New York City and Washington, D.C., rather. The payrolls report in America really pretty firm. That's given the equity market a lift. Equity futures this morning are firmer by 19 points on the S&P 500, up by around about 0.6%. In the bond market this morning, Treasury yields higher by just 5 basis points to 176 on a 2-year 158.
Let's get national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jonathan. It's a busy week ahead for congressional investigators in the impeachment inquiry if the witnesses show up. Several reports say the 4 White House officials slated for closed-door depositions today are not expected to testify. Democrats wanted to hear from 2 attorneys, including the top lawyer on the National Security Council, an aide to the chief of staff, and an official in the White House Budget Office. President Trump is threatening to cut federal funding to California for aid during wildfires that have burned across the state. Trump tweeted that California Governor Gavin Newsom has done a terrible job of forest management. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is defending her Medicare for All plan, attacked by rival Democrats. The senator says the squeeze on Americans is going to get worse and worse without further health care reform.
We are currently on a path that is going to cost Americans $11 trillion over the next 10 years. They're going to reach in their pockets over and over and over to pay deductibles.
Fellow Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg says that Warren's health care plan boils down to her way or the highway for consumers. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Poll.
Michael Barr, it's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report with John Stashauer. John.
Paul, embarrassment for the Jets. The Dolphins were the NFL's laughingstock, 0-7, all but one loss by double digits. But Miami won 26-18. Both teams are now 1-7. The Jets scored the first touchdown, but Miami got the next 3. The loss particularly galling for Jets coach Adam Gase, hired by the Jets after he was fired by the Dolphins.
And it's 1-7. I mean, everybody feel like, you don't put in all this time and effort to come out here and lose. We got to get things fixed. That's what they know. That's what I told them. That's what the other guys in the locker room were saying, the same thing.
Next Sunday, Jets and Giants at MetLife, where tonight the Giants look to end a 4-game losing streak. They'll host the Cowboys. Impressive win last night for Baltimore, 37-20 over previously unbeaten New England. Patriots defense had allowed only 4 touchdowns over the first 8 games, and they gave up 4 last night. Every team played in its home stadium yesterday and last night won. 11-0. The Knicks are 1-6, blown out at the Garden by Sacramento, 113-92. Carlos Beltran will be introduced today at Citi Field, the new manager of the Mets. About 50,000 ran the New York Marathon. Kenya's Jeffrey Kamworor with a late push, won as he did 2 years ago. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Paul?
John Stashower, thank you so much. Lisa, it is a risk-on day today. It comes back to what it has been for so many days over the last 12 months, which is trade. Getting a little bit of positive momentum here as it relates to trade, and I think that's kind of what the markets are looking for.
Indeed. I do want to just bring you one story that I found really interesting today, that the Japanese Microsoft outlet found that a 4-day work week actually increased productivity by 40% in a study. Did you see this story?
A 4-day work week increases productivity.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's going to float around here.
Well, but it was really interesting, and actually there were 92% of people thought that it was really good, and Gina Martin Adams quipped this morning, what happened to the other 8%? And so we were speculating why they didn't want to necessarily see a 4-day work week.
Exactly. Here, looking at futures here, S&P up 19, Dow up 175, NASDAQ up 66. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com. It's another Monday afternoon. Yet another rainy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and explore tropical rainforests. Fly from London Gatwick to Costa Rica with British Airways from £218 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
With the new Halifax Family Boost mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home, and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner. The new Halifax Family Boost mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
Fancy a weekend away with Peter Andre, Jason Donovan, Aqua, Atomic Kitten, Bewitched, Soul to Soul, or Madness? Well, now's your chance on an over-18s only live music weekend at Butlins. You'll get 3 nights entertainment, accommodation, pool parties, silent discos, and much more included in the price. With breaks from only £69 per person. Start planning your Butlins live music weekend at bigweekends.com.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
What if you could keep up with cable news even when you're on the go? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to MSNBC live without any commercial interruptions. All of the news, none of the ads. Listen live on TuneIn Premium today.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Some Trump administration officials scheduled to give depositions this week in the House impeachment investigation won't be doing so, says correspondent Suzanne Malveaux.
Democrats are trying to play this down, saying they don't need the testimony from these individuals. Obviously, they're disappointed, but they say they are now ready to move forward a new phase of the investigation. That would be the public testimony.
The head of Iran's nuclear program said today the country is launching a new array of at least 30 advanced centrifuges in violation of its nuclear agreement with world powers. He also said the country is working on a prototype centrifuge that's 50 times faster than those allowed under the agreement. 2 accused murderers are on the loose after breaking out of the Monterey County Jail in Northern California yesterday morning. The 2 had been in custody since last year. And the Maria wildfire northwest of Los Angeles is now 70% contained. It's already burned almost 15 square miles. I'm Christopher Cruz.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We continue to watch shares of Under Armour this morning. They're down almost 14% in early trading. This after the company disclosed that federal officials have been probing its accounting practices for more than 2 years. And the athletic wear company also lowered its full-year revenue forecast. McDonald's shares also moving lower, down 1.8% after it fired its chief executive. U.S. stock index futures are on the rise, meanwhile, along with stocks worldwide, while bonds slipping on optimism. China and the U.S. are moving closer to an interim trade deal. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures, they're up about 20 points. Dow futures up 168. NASDAQ futures up 66. The DAX in Germany's up 1.5%. 10-year Treasury down 15.30 seconds. Yield 1.76%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.58%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1% or 58 cents at 56.79 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1%, up $1.30 to 15.1260 an ounce. The euro 1.1157 against the dollar, the yen 108.43, and the British pound at 1.2923. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. It is 8:48 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
In the future, we will all work in food service. I'm Justin Fox, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Of the 128,000 new jobs created in the U.S. last month, 48,000 were at food services and drinking places. While that particular monthly number was flukishly high, restaurants, bars, coffee houses, and such have been a key driver of job gains during the current economic expansion, with 3 million more workers on their payrolls now than in 2010. There are now almost as many people working in food services as in manufacturing, a huge change from 2 decades ago. This poses some economic challenges, given that weekly pay is 3 times higher in manufacturing than in food services, and productivity growth at restaurants has been excruciatingly slow. Feeding and serving drinks to people is far from a new business. For better or for worse, though, it appears to be a major 21st century growth industry. I'm Justin Fox. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
And Bloomberg Opinion editorials can be heard every weekday at this time, and terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. S&P futures up about 19 points, Dow futures up 167, and NASDAQ futures up 63.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Pleased to say that on Bloomberg Surveillance we can bring you some Bloomberg Opinion. One of our columnists, Liam Denning, dropping by the studio here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. Front and center, the on-again, off-again IPO, Saudi Aramco. It's on again, Liam, but there's a difference. This is not what they set out to do all those years ago when they talked about bringing this to market. 5% to international markets, $2 trillion valuation. When was that? A couple of years back?
Yeah.
Now what is it?
3.5 years back, almost 4 years back.
It's 3% in Riyadh.
Yeah, it's they've had to definitely scale back their ambitions in terms of, you know, how they were going to tap international investors and bring at least 5% of this to the market. One thing they haven't really scaled back is the price that they want. I mean, there was talk last week of them compromising and bringing it down to about 1.7, 1.8. But as I said to my colleague yesterday, only a prince could regard 1.8 trillion as a compromise. But yeah, so I think that's their big difficulty. It's always been this thing of trying to get that headline price.
So, Liam, what I find, well, there's so many fascinating aspects of this transaction, but one of them is going to some of the wealthy folks in Saudi Arabia to get them to invest in this deal. And if my memory serves me correctly, these are the same families that were locked in the same Ritz-Carlton and shaken down for, you know, several, you know, huge amounts of money to pay back to the government. Is the expectation that they will, in fact, step up some of these big royal families and invest significantly into this company?
I think there is that expectation. I mean, I think there's two elements to it. One is that you get large, wealthy, you know, Saudi pools of capital to invest and effectively almost do their patriotic duty to support this thing. There are also shares are going to be sold to the general public, and indeed there were reports of them borrowing to pay for that, which always sets off alarm bells in my head. And in fact, you know, we saw in the document that got released yesterday, for Saudi citizens who buy the shares and then hold them for 6 months, they'll get an extra 10% bonus. So there's an added inducement to not only buy but to hang on. Right? Yeah.
So I'm wondering who's going to be buying this in addition to those people who are corralled into a hotel room. Internationally, there hasn't been much appetite for energy-related stocks recently, right?
No.
So who's going to buy it?
Well, there hasn't been much appetite, but this is still, you know, $1 trillion sector. So you may see some reapportionment of the money that's already in the sector to Saudi Aramco. I mean, one thing that I was thinking about on Friday is we just had a fairly lackluster earnings season from Big Oil, you know, all kind of stumbling on this perennial issue of how do you balance investment versus capex and dividends. And Aramco, you know, has been quite clever in positioning its IPO in the sense that it has gone all in on effectively guaranteeing dividends for 5 years and playing up the fact that it's enormous.
5% dividends, Rich, right? I mean, that's above.
Yes, for minority shareholders. So in effect, if you're a minority shareholder, you will be treated like a preferred shareholder, essentially, for 5 years. So they're trying to almost market this thing as almost like a bond in the near term. And I can see why they do that, because, you know, when you're valuing Aramco, single biggest lever in the valuation is the discount rate. A 1% move either way, you know, on my numbers is like $150 to $200 billion of value. So they're trying to get that discount rate as low as possible.
So, Liam, why did they pull back from the plan to go to a major global exchange like New York or London here?
I think there's a few factors. You know, I do think that the overriding factor has been the valuation. I just don't think most international investors were prepared to entertain a number anywhere close to the $2 trillion valuation that was talked about. There are other issues as well. You know, there are issues around the level of transparency that you would need to adhere to with a listing in a place like London and New York.
So one other potential source of foreign interest is the fact that the Tadawul index is actually included in the MSCI EM index. Excuse me. So that could end up funneling more money to it as well, right?
Yeah. So I've always assumed that money for this will come from two pools of capital. Existing big oil money and existing emerging market money. I think the tricky thing is whether they can actually attract, quote unquote, new money into energy, which I just think is it's very difficult to do that because the dynamics around the industry are so problematic. And as much as there are many criticisms that can be laid at the feet of big oil in terms of some of their mistakes in terms of investment over the past decade. The elephant in the room with Aramco is that you're effectively privatizing an arm of the government. It is a commercially respected company, no doubt, but, it's still going to be 97% owned by the Saudi government. That's where most of its loyalties are going to lie.
So, Liam, are they going to actually come to Boston to go see the Fidelities and the Putnams of the world and go to New York and London are they going to do that? Are they going to try to sell stock to Western investors?
I think if they want to get anywhere close to the valuation range that they want, then they're going to have to.
But the issue is, the price discovery by just limiting it to Riyadh is arguably not as robust as it would have been if you've come to New York. But so even if they price this thing at $1.8 or $1.9 trillion, when this stock trades, it's going to find its natural price, no?
It is going to find its natural price, you would expect. But remember, it's listing only in Riyadh, right. A market of very limited liquidity. There are also inducements that have been put out there, like the bonus shares. If you hang on for a while, it will depend a lot, I think, on the final makeup of who buys. If it's overwhelmingly domestic, then you may find the price doesn't necessarily find its quote unquote natural level.
I love that Jonathan Farrow asked you when you walked in, can you even call this an IPO? And you said, maybe a tax.
Or an initial country offering.
Initial country offering, giving a new definition to ICO. It'll be interesting to see whether people are warm to this.
Well, I guess my question is there enough demand or capital within Riyadh to buy this offering? Or do you have to go to more Western markets like New York, or Boston, or London?
I mean, possibly. Again, it comes down to what price do you want? I mean, definitely if you want a higher price, you want to tap the widest pool of capital you want. I think there's also another element. If you want it to be a credible IPO, this cannot just be, selling it inside the four walls of the house. There has to be some level of interest from outside.
Yeah, I would think the Goldmans and the Bank of Americas of the world are saying we have to go to these big markets. We have to go to the government of Singapore, to the Nordic, to these big pools of money.
And there will be plenty of people who will be interested. There is an extra wrinkle here, though. A lot of the big sovereign wealth funds are trying to cut back with their fossil fuel investments, whether you're talking about the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund or if you're talking about the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund. So you have to wonder how that's going to play in as well. Liam Denning, thank you so much for being with us. Liam Denning is, of course, Bloomberg opinion columnist on all things energy and Tesla, because he also does write about Tesla, and ICOs now, which are not what you may think, because we have redefined it away from initial coin offering to, yeah. So coming up, we're going to be talking more about markets rallying on the heels of better than expected trade news, earnings, with a couple of big corporate exceptions. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another rainy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick to see spectacular coral reefs and white sand beaches. Fly from London Gatwick to Mauritius with British Airways, with flights and 7 nights hotel from just £949 per person. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple of years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City to our worldwide audience. Paul Sweeney here alongside Lisa Abramowitz, who's sitting in for Tom Keene. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Tom Keene on one of his days off that Jonathan Farrow is eagerly counting.
Yes, exactly right. We have a risk-on day today. The S&P up 18 points. Looks like we're getting some optimism building for that trade agreement between the U.S. And China. We'll have more on that coming up. Also, the last big week for earnings here. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, he sees the finish line. He sees the finish line. This is the last big week. Dave, what are you looking at right here?
Well, there are a couple of stories outside of earnings that are definitely front and center in today's trading. One of them is McDonald's. That stock down 1.5% in early trading. The restaurant chain fired CEO Steve Easterbrook for having a consensual relationship with an employee in violation of company policy. Now, Easterbrook had led McDonald's moves into online ordering and food delivery. They've named the head of their U.S. operations as his successor. Under Armour, two classes of shares in the S&P 500. They're both down more than 13%. The athletic wear maker said U.S. regulators have been examining its accounting practices for more than 2 years. The disclosure followed a report on the probe in the Wall Street Journal. Under Armour also cut its full-year sales forecast. Now we can turn to earnings. We'll start with Berkshire Hathaway, whose numbers were out over the weekend. Stocks up 1%. Third quarter profit at Warren Buffett's company beat analyst average estimate in a Bloomberg survey, and Berkshire's cash on hand rose to a record $128 billion.
What is Warren going to do with that cash?
That is the question. I mean, because you're not making a whole lot in the bond market, and it just keeps growing. So we'll see where that goes. Fiat Chrysler's up 3%. The automaker sports car unit Ferrari reported third quarter earnings and beat estimates and raised full year forecasts. Ferrari shares, by the way, also higher in U.S. trading. Fiat Chrysler up 3%, Ferrari up 3.5%. Sprint's up about 0.5%. The wireless company had more contract customers in its fiscal second quarter than analysts expected. On the other hand, earnings and revenue came up short of estimates. Now, Sprint said it sees that merger with T-Mobile US being completed early next year. And since we're talking deals, there are a few of them that have popped up in today's trading. The most active stock is one of them, Wright Medical Group. It's up 30.5%. It's a Dutch maker of orthopedic devices that accepted a takeover offer from a U.S.-based peer, Stryker. The all-cash deal is valued at about $4 billion. Stryker shares down 3% in early trading. Iberia Bank's up 0.75%. The Louisiana-based lender agreed to an all-stock takeover by First Horizon National. The agreement initially was valued at about $3.9 billion. First Horizon also up about 0.75%. Then you have Pattern Energy Group down 3%. The power producer agreed to a $2.6 billion takeover by Canada Pension Plan, which is really, that country's version of the Social Security system. The deal's valued at $26.75 a share. That's 3.8% less than Friday's close, which is why Pattern Energy shares are lower. Some analyst calls of note. Verizon lower by about 0.5%. The phone company was cut to neutral from Buy It No More Instanet. Harley Davidson down 2%. The motorcycle maker was lowered the equivalent of sell from hold at KeyBank Capital Markets. And Marvell Technology up 4.5%. The chip maker was raised the equivalent of buy from hold at Wells Fargo.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for that. And of course, Under Armour also absolutely plunging ahead of the market as a result of a company disclosure that federal officials have been probing its accounting practices. And among those who are probing their accounting practices are the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, which brings us to our next guest, yes. Arthur Levitt, who was the former chair of the U.S. SEC. He is also a director of Bloomberg LP and, of course, a Bloomberg Radio contributor. Arthur, thank you so much for being with us. Talking about the SEC and enforcement powers, there is currently a case in front of the Supreme Court that takes a look at the SEC's ability to assets as a penalty to malfeasance. The Supreme Court may be poised to say that the SEC can't do that anymore. How big of a problem would that be for the SEC?
I think it's a very big problem. They're arguing that disgorgement isn't a remedy that Congress has authorized. And disgorgement is designed to return ill-gotten gains to people who were harmed. So if the courts pursue that line of thinking, it has to be Congress that would then have to reestablish disgorgement as a fair measure. The Trump administration and the SEC both have urged the court to reject the appeal, saying that Congress authorized the commission to seek disgorgement in 3 separate statutes. So this is a terribly important issue because the right of the commission to seek gains that were falsely awarded is a terribly important remedy. And without it, the SEC will lose one of its most potent remedies.
So, Arthur, what is really the argument behind stripping the SEC of this disgorgement issue? Because as you just mentioned, it's really one of their most effective tools of enforcement. What's the thinking behind it?
I think the thinking behind it points back to a decision that said that disgorgement is covered by a 5-year statute of limitations that applies to penalties. And that ruling explicitly declined to say whether the SEC had power to seek disgorgement in the first place. So I think that's the ruling that this refers to.
Arthur, what would you say to people who push back against the SEC's power here, saying that they use it as sort of a strong-arm tactic to get banks and other financial institutions to just settle on large claims without necessarily declaring wrongdoing, and then feed the department billions of dollars as a result?
I'd say that it's one of the few devices that the Commission has to respond to wrongdoers. And I think it's equitable in that it seeks to recover dollars from people who have earned those dollars illegally. I think that's a fair and equitable solution. And up till now, both the Commission and the courts have felt that way. I'd be very surprised if the Supreme Court decided to use a legal argument to strip the SEC of those powers, and I think Congress would then feel obliged to specify disgorgement as an equitable solution for the Commission.
Arthur Levitt, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts. Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission, talking to us about Congress or the Supreme Court potentially stripping the SEC of disgorgement powers, and that the SEC won about $2.5 billion in disgorgement orders in fiscal 2018. So we're talking about some real money there, Lisa. So again, looking at the market here, Lisa, as we start off another week, it looks like we're going to start it off on the right foot. We've got the equity indices up about 0.6% here. Looks like some positive, some optimism on the trade deal kind of finding its way rally into the marketplace. So, again, another good start to the week here.
I just want to follow up what Arthur Levitt was talking about with disgorgement. One of the funny things, or I don't know, funny, but interesting developments as a result of the SEC's power to seize assets as a penalty is that the federal government became one of the biggest owners of Bitcoin over the past few years because they've been seizing Bitcoin from criminals who are using the sort of cryptocurrency as a tool of cloaking their actual behavior. So the U.S. Marshal Service has been auctioning off the digital coins in a number of different auctions, but billions of dollars of Bitcoin, which just to me is like an incredible turn of events, depending on when they got in and seized the assets. They could have done pretty well.
Exactly. Are they trading Bitcoin? So interesting. Just going back to that Saudi Aramco deal, it's really a fascinating discussion here. Is it really an initial public offering if it's limited to such a small market and perhaps a limited number of buyers? It's going to be fascinating to see how the underwriters, how broadly they want to bring that to marketplace.
And I do wonder, from an investor perspective, how much they're counting on the inclusion of the Saudi Arabian stock market in broader emerging market indexes, how much that will fuel some of the demand, with certain investors saying, look, that anytime people get bullish on emerging markets, it will funnel cash into the Saudi Aramco stock, even if there are questions about the government's relationship with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the number of questions around this company.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, I think it's going to be fascinating to see, how broadly the underwriters in the company and the kingdom want to bring that to market, because the broader you go, the more price discovery will occur, and we'll have to see. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get a check on all things outside of everything that we talk about here. Michael Barr here with us. Michael.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Paul. We're a year away from Election Day, and the Democratic field is getting less crowded with Beto O'Rourke dropping out. In an ABC News Washington Post poll among registered Democratic voters, only 4 candidates break 2%. Former VP Joe Biden is still leading, but Elizabeth Warren is gaining ground, and candidates are starting to take aim at the senator. That's included a lot of talk about health care. Warren says it will be paid for by taxing wealthy Americans and businesses and asking employers to pitch in too. Riot police in Hong Kong stormed several malls over the weekend to thwart protesters. As some protests took a more violent turn, police say a man wielding a knife slashed 4 people and bit off a part of a politician's ear. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. An ear?
Okay. Well, Paul Sweeney and I are both shrugging our shoulders. We are seeing very risk on today as people get optimistic about a trade deal. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills, the kind of skills that companies need to build real products, and the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit visit stoptextsstopwrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the ad.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another cold day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and relax with 365 beautiful beaches.
So yes, sir, what would you like to have?
Fly from London Gatwick to Antigua with British Airways from £223 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Book by November the 12th at ba.com/wintersun. With British Airways, incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
15-10-5, touchdown!
Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Giants. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
At the 5 on the hash mark, running into the end zone. It is a touchdown. He gets the high snap. He rolls out of the pocket. Throws a short pass across the way. It's caught by Albert Wilson at the pylon. He goes into the end zone. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium.
Good. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series, of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Adam Grant, and this is Work Life, my podcast with Ted. I study how to make work not suck.
And it's defined like this.
Blackout is a suspense-filled thriller from Endeavor Audio and Q-Code.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond. Define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Aslinda Amin.
Michael Mahalak, former U.S. ambassador to Vietnam, joining us here at the ASEAN Summit in Bangkok. Phase one of the trade deal on the verge of getting signed, but how significant is it? I mean, it's pretty much a done deal, but it doesn't take a look at things like intellectual property, for instance.
Well, I think we'll have to actually take a look at the language when it comes out, but the consensus that I'm hearing from various people is that it looks as though China is in fact going to buy some agricultural products, but on their terms. In other words, looking at the market, looking at what prices are, not in terms of trying to get back to anywhere near the levels of purchases that they had before the trade war started. And in terms of intellectual property, well, that's kind of been kicked down the road. I would expect that this time we'll probably get some nice words saying that we respect intellectual property, we think it's important, et cetera, but the deal has got to be done on enforcement. What happens if after they sign something like this, there is no follow-through on the part of the Chinese, which is what's happened so often in the past?
That will not stop President Trump from claiming victory.
Of course not. Of course not. This will end up being the greatest agreement that the United States has ever signed since the Declaration of Independence.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Continues.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. The Bloomberg Futures Report brought to you by IBKR and CME Group. The new micro E-mini futures contracts are available at IBKR at the lowest commissions. Learn more at IBKR.com/CME Mini. U.S. stock index futures are rising along with stocks worldwide, while bonds slip on optimism. China and the U.S. are moving closer to an interim trade deal. The Stocks Europe 600 index hitting its highest since August 2015, led by miners and automakers, currently up 1.1%. Automakers jumped after the U.S. Commerce Secretary said tariffs on importing vehicles into the U.S. market might be unnecessary. Right now, S&P futures are up 18 points. Dow futures up 163. NASDAQ futures up about 59. The DAX in Germany is up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury down 18/30 seconds, yield 1.77%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.59%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.6% or 91 cents at 57.10 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1% up $1.30 to 15.1270 an ounce. The euro 1.1150 against the dollar. British pound 1.2908 and the yen at 108.49. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
Karen, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Well, we're about 80%, I guess, away through earnings season. We got another big week, this being the last big week, to get a sense of what we've learned so far in earnings. We turn to Gina Martin-Adams. She's Bloomberg Intelligence Chief U.S. Equity Strategist, joining us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. So, Gina, this is the last big week for earnings. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson is loving it because he just sits there and deals with these earnings every day, all day. What have you learned so far? What's your big takeaway given this earnings season?
Our biggest takeaway is that things actually aren't as bad as expected. The S&P 500 is certainly not in great condition when it comes to earnings fundamentals, but it's also not, the index itself is not indicating any sort of severe weakness or an imminent economic recession, which I think is what we worried about earlier this year, especially in the August-September time frame when investors were rotating very, very defensively.
Something else that you mentioned earlier this morning on Bloomberg Television on Surveillance was that the companies that outperform or that exceed the analyst estimates end up with bigger gains in their share price than traditionally based on history, but also the converse.
Yep.
What does that tell you?
It just tells me that there's a lot of nervousness. And this is something that we've been seeing sequentially really build up since the third quarter of 2018 when earnings peaked. Investors are rewarding companies that beat significantly more than usual, but they're also really punishing the stocks of companies that miss expectations significantly more than usual. So you're seeing this really wide dispersion of returns develop based on winners and losers in earnings season. I think that's just a function of sensitivity. It's, okay, we knew earnings were peaking in the third quarter of 2018. It's really hard to print 30% earnings growth year after year after year without more tax reform. And going forward, then we sort of lost our guidepost as investors. So where do we go from here? During a slowdown, it's usually typically pretty tough for stocks. The extent of the slowdown is still under big question. Investors aren't 100% certain as to where we're going from here. The economic data has not been particularly supportive, and that's showing up in the earnings seasons on a quarterly basis.
So, Gina, I know you and your team, you do a lot of work on valuation. I'm looking at the S&P up over 20% this year, but earnings, not a big grower. Is this market getting expensive?
When we run our fair value model, actually, we're right on fair value right now. Our fair value model pointed us to 30.60 for the S&P 500. Looks like we're going to trade a little above fair value. The trouble I think that you have in macro forecasting right now is, yes, stocks should be increasingly expensive because bonds are increasingly expensive because the Fed is increasingly supportive. So that's driving valuation multiples higher, yet there's no evidence to suggest they're unusually high. They're probably about fair value. The question mark is, where do earnings go from here? Because you have this sort of troubling scenario developing where the macroeconomic data is pointing you in one direction, and yet when you get into 2020, you're comparing to no earnings growth a year ago, so you're going to have positive earnings growth. That momentum is historically much more important to driving stock prices than is the macro momentum, the sort of macroeconomic indicators. So I think what you're finding is valuations are definitely supported. Macro forecasters are going to potentially underestimate the potential recovery of the earnings stream into 2020 simply because the comp gets so easy. Because when you're totally reliant on the macro indicators, you're missing sort of an earnings cycle that tends to drive earnings growth on a short-term basis.
Look at that. When you lower the bar to the floor, you can actually step over it. I do wonder, though, one thing heading into this earnings season, and speaking to the volatility, was remarkably little guidance in terms of what the actual reports would look like. I'm wondering, just based on some of the forecasts, whether CEOs have more visibility into the future than they did, say, 2 months ago.
It's a good question, Mark. I don't know that they do, to be quite honest with you. And we are seeing guidance come in, and it's a little bit incrementally better than it was this time last quarter and this time in the quarter preceding that. So it's incremental baby steps on guidance, but what you've seen over a sequence of years, frankly, is companies guiding less and less and less going forward. Some of this is an institutionalized sort of effort to force companies to become more long-term focused, less short-term focused. If you think about the giant buy-side accounts, these companies themselves, the actual investor base, doesn't want the quarterly volatility. They want to have a long-term vision, and companies to give you that long-term vision. The result of that is less and less guidance on a quarterly basis because it's less and less demanded. Now, that also means that to the extent we get it, we have heightened sensitivity about it, right? Because a cat might give guidance, and our natural extrapolation is that so meaningful for every machinery and every industrials company because we don't get guidance from everybody. So it does have a danger to it because I think the investor does need the constant reminder as to where this company is going. And yet the investor also doesn't want the quarterly volatility. I'm not so sure you can have your cake and eat it too.
Real quickly, Gina, what's the sector that jumps out at you right now as attractive?
I'm not supposed to use the word attractive.
Oh, that's right.
Nonetheless, when we think about our sector...
here's what's attractive.
When we think about our sector scorecard, we actually highlighted this in a couple of reports last week. Valuations are extremely discounted for two very overlooked sectors right now, healthcare and communication services. These two sectors, intriguingly, have one thing in common, and that is a policy overhang. Investors are very scared as to what the regulators are going to do with respect to technology regulation and also where healthcare is going.
Yeah, and so if perhaps it doesn't go as badly as they think,
right,
it could be rebounding, which you've already seen recently. Gina Martin-Adams, Chief U.S. Equity Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you. Always so smart and insightful on markets. As we come to the close of the third quarter earnings season, I'm Lisa Abramowitz in for Tom Keene alongside the great Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Some investors are reacting to the ousting of McDonald's CEO Steve Easterbrook by unloading their shares. The company fired Easterbrook after he had a consensual relationship with an employee in violation of McDonald's policy. Stock futures point to a higher open this morning. The S&P and the NASDAQ are already at record highs. S&P futures are up 17. NASDAQ futures up